Hello, everyone. It is 1 o'clock Eastern. So we are reconvening here. If you've been with us all morning, welcome back. If you're just joining us for the first time, welcome to the Allmaps public convening. Um, our first sort of public check-in on progress and updates around the Allmaps project, a grant-funded initiative between the Leventhal Map and Education Center at the Boston Public Library, the American Geographical Society Library at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and the wider Allmaps team. We've just heard from a round of really amazing researchers and educators who are using Allmaps in creative ways. And we had some great questions around from the audience around how Allmaps interfaces with collections and discovery. And I think that's a great segue into our final session on Allmaps and collections. I'm excited to introduce four folks from our team. But before I do that, I wanted to give a quick shout out to everyone here in BPL today who has worked over the last year and more even to make Allmaps in our collections a reality. On screen, we have Garrett Nelson, head curator and president here at the Leventhal Center. We have Marcy Bidney, curator at the American Geographical Society Library. My co-presenter, Stephen Appel, geospatial librarian at AGSL. And Anne Hanlon, who has been our digital humanities director over at UWM and who's been dutifully helping us with the Zoom management all day. Not pictured are Jay Chen, who manages a lot of the IIIF applications over at AGSL, Emily Bowe, our assistant director here at the Leventhal Center. Am I forgetting anyone? And Bert. We've seen Bert, but Bert's back. And he'll be here to talk this afternoon. I just wanted, I think that's all. I just wanted to make sure that everyone who's not on screen, there's a much wider team here supporting this project. And there's a team outside of the center and BPL and AGSL as well. And I'm really excited to welcome one of those people, Eric Larson, a GeoBlacklight software developer who we worked with earlier this year to help. Well, we didn't help. He built a GeoBlacklight and Blacklight plugin for Allmaps. And I'm not going to say anything more about it because you should hear it straight from the source. So in this final session of the morning, we'll hear from Eric about this plugin. We'll hear from Bert a little bit about a forthcoming application called Allmaps Curator. And we'll hear some remarks from Garrett and Marcy as curators from a curatorial perspective around what these kinds of tools can help engender in digital map collections more broadly. So I will turn my screen off now and hand it over to Eric. Thanks.
All right. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yep. All right. Thanks for the introduction. I'm happy to be here today to talk about work I've done on the Blacklight Allmaps plugin. My name is Eric. I'm a librarian and the lead developer for the Big Ten Academic Alliance GeoPortal. I'm a core contributor to the GeoBlacklight project, and I'm also a GeoBlacklight consultant. I'm going to do a little bit of gatekeeping here to make sure everyone knows the technologies that we're talking about. So Blacklight is a popular open source discovery tool. It's a Ruby on Rails application. It's in use at many institutions in academia and elsewhere. It's been used to create library catalogs, to facilitate digital collections, to provide access to archival material. And there are different tools that have been built on top of this platform, including one called, here's a screenshot basically of lots of institutions using it. One of the plugins for Blacklight is called GeoBlacklight. And this adds a layer of geospatial search, web mapping technology, and layer previews to the discovery tool. There are lots of different GeoBlacklight installations out there in the universe as well. And the one that I'm in charge of is the Big Ten GeoPortal. That is an online tool to collect the geospatial information and imagery from the Big Ten member libraries. We've got about 100,000 items in that geo portal, and about 15% of those are IIIF compliant items, things that would be well suited to georeferencing inside of Allmaps. So as a geo blacklight developer and a software consultant, I was approached by Ian and members of the team to work on Blacklight Allmaps. This is a plugin that works with both blacklight applications and geo blacklight applications. It's an open source tool. You can find it online at GitHub, and it will help you take the functionality that we saw this morning displayed by the great set of speakers and get this into a geo blacklight or blacklight application. How the plugin works is really there are some scripts that we use to identify the georeferenceable IIIF items from your geo blacklight and blacklight solar index. That's where we store data in these applications. From those georeferenceable items, we contact the Allmaps API to see if those IIIF items have indeed already been georeferenced inside of Allmaps. If we do find an item has been georeferenced, we copy the Allmaps IIIF annotation data into our local database for the web application. We can display the georeferenced map on our item view page, and we can update our Apache Solar Index to provide a faceting option so people can easily discover these Allmaps georeferenced items. And if we don't find an item that's been, already georeferenced in Allmaps, we present an option for a user to georeference the item themselves to add to Allmaps. To take advantage of this code, the installation is very simple. You can add the Blacklight Allmaps gem to your Ruby on Rails gem file, bundle it, and then run the install generator script. You can configure the application, to make sure that we're aware of which field we want to use to look for these IIIF items. And then really the heart of this project, is really communicating with the Allmaps API to see where we have matches. So we have written scripts inside of the plugin that you can schedule to run periodically to find those matches in your local collection with the Allmaps database. Again, and one of the things that was brought up earlier today is, should local institutions store copies of the IIIF annotations? And if you adopt this plugin, we're doing that already for you. So when we have, hits that match in the Allmaps API, we're going to store a local copy of that Allmaps annotation in the local database for perpetuity and for, persistence. And then again, we're able to update the solar index and provide some discoverability to those items as well through some scripts. So if you go to the Big Ten Geo portal, you'll see that we do have, 48 items that so far have been georeferenced via the Allmaps plugin. And this is what that looks like in our interface, is we present this tabbed view that shows you the original item viewer, which is a IIIF viewer for us. This is Mirador. And alongside that, we have a secondary tab for a georeferenced map. So here you can see that if I switch the view over, we have that Allmaps warped map available for view directly within the Geo Blacklight interface. Another example here, just as you can see, it nicely overlays on top of the mapping tools that Geo Blacklight uses by default. Take a quick look, maybe if we can run this little video. Here's another example of Iceland. It gives you an example to see that we've got leaflet controls that allow you to open up into a full screen version and to also adjust the opacity of the map over Iceland. So we worked really hard to make sure that the plugin had all of the leaflet controls and behaviors that are default to Geo Blacklight. And then here's the example where we have a IIIF item and it's a digitized map, but it has yet to be georeferenced in Allmaps. You'll see we just have the singular tab at the top for the item viewer, but on the right-hand side of the page in our Show Tools panel, we have a link to georeference this item. If you click on that link, you go directly into the Allmaps editor and are given the option to begin masking and placing your control points on the map. Of course, this plugin has been adopted by some other institutions as well. So here's a quick example of the AGSL GeoDiscovery application running on the same Allmaps, Blacklight Allmaps plugin. Beyond the plugin, I just wanted to have a chance to offer a few tips for people that are looking to adopt Allmaps. One of the tips really is straightforward. Take advantage of the map library plugins that Bert and the team have made available for people. Whether you use Map Libre, OpenLayers, or Leaflet, there's lots of great documentation on how to get started and leverage those tools and how to get Allmaps data into those mapping libraries. If you're looking for real, documentation on how this works, the best place to find that really is inside of the GitHub repository for Allmaps and to read the README files inside each of those modules. And then one of the best places to kind of get a sense for what you can do with Allmaps and maybe future directions of the project is to read through the Allmaps posts on Observable. I think this is a way to have a little bit of insight into Bert's mind, perhaps, and directions that you can leverage the technology that might not be quite as obvious. But there's a great wealth of information here. If you're unfamiliar with Observable, it's like a blog post, but it's also code. So you can see exactly how these things come together. And just want to say thank you to the Allmaps development team and Leventhal Map and Education Center, the American Geographical Society Library for involving me in this project. Looking forward to continuing to grow the Allmaps collection alongside the Big Ten Academic Alliance and continue to move this project forward.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Eric. It's great to hear this summary. It's exciting to see examples of this plugin out in the world. And I'm sure Garrett will talk a little bit more about how this relates to our collections, which also are a GeoBlacklight application here at the Leventhal Center. Bert, I think we'll hand it over to you to say a little bit about Allmaps Curator as a forthcoming next Allmaps tool.
All right. Yeah. Can everybody see my screen? It works. Great. Yeah. Thank you, Eric, for telling the people about the observable notebooks. They are indeed. Yeah. It's just so easy to create interactive little things with them, and we've been using it quite a lot in the Allmaps team. I will be talking about a new upcoming tool called Allmaps Curator that we are developing as part of the project, the NEH funded project. Currently, Allmaps only works for single TripArchive resources, so you can load a single TripArchive image or a TripArchive manifest. So TripArchive manifest can contain multiple canvases with multiple images, and we are also working on support for TripArchive collections. So TripArchive collections are the way that TripArchive designed to group together different TripArchive manifests, but then collections can also be nested. So you can group multiple collections that can contain multiple manifests. However, usually those TripArchive resources are created by the institutions themselves. It's not very easy to create your own manifests. You can, of course, but most people will just take the TripArchive resources that are made available by the TripArchive resources. So if you want to create your own collections of maps, currently it's not that easy. So that is one part of the thing that Allmaps Curator will do, is make it possible for users to group together their own collections of maps from different institutions. Yeah, let's briefly go over the way currently Allmaps works. So this is an example of a manifest with a single image that contains a single map. This is a map of the Leiden Botanical Gardens. This is an example of a manifest from I think the city of Holyoke in Massachusetts, referenced by the people from the from LMAC. This is a manifest that contains many images. And let's look at those maps in more detail. So this is a beautiful map of the Leiden Botanical Gardens with, you can even see the tiles on the roofs, and you can even see the individual plants in the botanical gardens. And let's fly to the other side of the ocean. And there we are in Holyoke. I've never been there. It looks very lovely with those canals, but I think it's just warehouses. You can, like I said, you can create your own collections. This is a map that has been georeferenced by Martin Meyers with his algorithm that automatically crops images. So this is the famous Dutch map made after the triangulation done by Cornelis Krijhoff in the 1800s. So this is really the first accurate map. But Martin Meyers, he is very handy, and he creates his own manifests and his own TRPIF data to work with TRPIF resources from institutions that don't always publish manifests. But like I said, this is not something that everybody always does, can easily do. So yeah, we need a way to do that. We need a new way for people to collect maps from different institutions, group them, reorder them, maybe remove the ones that they don't like from a manifest, and also then dereference the images that have not been dereferenced and keep track of the dereferencing progress. So you can also create crowdsourcing tasks with this new tool. So this is what Allmaps Curator will do. You can manage georeferenced map collections, and you can keep track of progress. First of all, you can use it to import TRPIF resources. So you can load manifests, you can load individual TRPIF images, you can load TRPIF collections, and you can start reordering them and regrouping them. And like I said, removing maybe images that you don't want to use. You can create sub-collections and create URLs that people can use to georeference those collections in Allmaps Editor. You can send those links to your colleagues or to your friends, or even to the crowd to do large-scale georeferencing projects. And then you can keep track of progress, see if you like if you agree with the georeferencing work, if it's accurate enough, and then you can start tagging or pinning the versions of the georeference map that you like. And also you can export georeference data, of course, so you can export everything as annotations. So to maybe import it in your own digital collections management system. Yeah, for who are we building this tool? For map curators, for people that are part of the institution that has collections of maps, but also for educators, for people that work at universities or schools that are using maps in their classes, that want to maybe for a specific class group together a set of maps that they can easily find back. For historians, people maybe who are writing publications and that want to have an easy way of keeping track of the maps that they're using in their research. And maybe for me, this is most exciting because Allmaps Curator really also is a tool that I really miss. I constantly look at maps and then I forget about them, and I would like to have a way to be able to find them back by topic or by geographic location. So it's also going to be a tool that everybody can use. Anybody who is interested in maps can use Allmaps Curator to create collections. We will do this by adding 4 new concepts to Allmaps. First of all is this thing that we currently call a list. It can hold multiple TRPIF resources like images, manifests, and collections. And they can be either ungeoreferenced or georeferenced. And they can also keep track of a certain version of a georeferenced map. We will add authentication to Allmaps so users can log in and keep track of their work and start creating lists. Organizations will get their own special place in Allmaps where they can group together their own collections, start creating lists, and we will make it possible for multiple users to be part of an organization. And then we will improve version control in Allmaps. There's a very basic version control for georeference map currently, but it's not good enough, and we need something better. So in this new way that we're working on, we will keep all history, but people can always fork a certain version of the georeference map and then can continue working from there. And institutions can then view the different versions in Allmaps Curator and then pick the best version they like, and then that version gets automatically linked to their account. So if you open a map that belongs to a certain institution, you'll see the version that they have selected. So these are just a few examples. I'm not sure if this will be the actual way it will work, but just so you get an idea of what it could do. So LMAC currently has an exhibition called Processing Place. So all the maps in that exhibition could be in a list. Let's say there is a geographic way of grouping maps, and then you can tag them in different ways. So you can create new georeferencing projects for crowds or for interns that can use these tags. So they only work on the maps that need some extra work. Or users can get their own favorite or starred list of maps. So you can always find back maps that you really loved. Or maybe you can, for example, use it in a way like this. These are maps that I saved during this trip to Boston. And I can imagine that you can group them together and create a list so you can always find them back. This is so Schiphol Airport, that's the Dutch international airport, is in what was used to be a lake. And from there I flew to JFK and made it all the way to Boston. So this is, I think, a way that people who are interested in maps can use Allmaps Curator to group together different maps. Yeah, we've started working on the backend updates, and we'll start working on a prototype of the user interface sometime next year. And I'm very excited about this, and I will keep you updated. And as soon as we have something people can start using, we'll let everybody know. Thanks.
Great. Thanks both. We got one question while you all were speaking, Bert and Eric. I actually think it might be good to just answer this before we hand it over to Garrett and Marcy. Kelly asks, very inspired by each of these presentations. This question was prompted by, but isn't exclusively directed to Eric. Is there any way to know how, quote, accurately a given map has been georeferenced, and or what the limitations or georeferencing logic might have been? This question is looming in my mind as I think about working with multiple collections, larger map series, and with work performed by multiple users. Yes, there is a way to know how, quote, accurately a map has been georeferenced. There is the sort of standard measurement for this is a root mean square error, RMSE value. This is commonly, you would commonly encounter this in a desktop GIS software. It will tell you basically an estimation of how well the map has been transformed. Bert, you should correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that one of our colleagues is working on making that available in Allmaps Editor. And as we already saw earlier, that the sort of visualization of that error measurement already does exist in Allmaps Viewer through things like the distortion measurements that show you how much a certain region of the map has been stretched or compressed with those red and blue shadings. So I think hopefully that's helpful for your question, Bert. And Eric, is there anything that either of you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I think these algorithms can compute if, well, yeah, there's no way, of course, we can tell whether a map has been very accurately dereferenced at a very wrong location. However, if multiple users start dereferencing a map and then one of the users puts it at the other side of the world, then I think we do have a way by comparing the different versions. If there's outliers, then we probably can remove these. So I think once we have better user accounts in Allmaps and multiple people maybe checking a map and maybe even updating the georeferencing, then we do get better ways of finding errors like that the distortion algorithms cannot detect.
I'll just add that the concept of like quality control has come up in discussions within the Big Ten in our geographic information network and the librarians and the staff that work for the Big Ten. I think there are various ways that can be arranged. And I think there's also been discussions in the Allmaps community on how to mark something as canonical, right? Or provide experts their own log into the system to ensure that it's not necessarily just crowd sourced material, but perhaps this is something that a professional has georeferenced and contributed to the community.
Yeah, exactly. I basically Bert highlighted some of these points in Allmaps, his talk about Allmaps Curator, and really, Eric, this is a really critical piece of the infrastructure that technically speaking exists, but there's no user interface to access, manipulate, or discover those different versions or assigning canonical annotations for a particular collection. And that's precisely what we're going to work on building in the next round of application development. I'm going to hand it over to Garrett and Marcy now. We have about 20 minutes left. I'm excited to hear from you all in conversation with Bert and Eric.
Thanks, Ian. It's been a great morning so far. And like Ian said, it's the work that you see here is supported by a really huge team. And I think some of what Marcy and I wanted to talk about at the end of day one is to zoom out metaphorically and really think about what tech tools and technologies like Allmaps mean for us as people who manage map collections, who are interested in digital scholarship and the digital humanities more broadly, what that means for both scholarly and public engagement with digital collections. And what sorts of kinds of institutional shifts does this offer to us? What opportunities become possible when we have tools like Allmaps that allow us to work across collections, but also what new forms of organizational prioritization, technical management, long-term stability do we have to consider when we're building these sorts of tools? So, Marcy and I both come at this as people whose job is to manage institutions that in turn manage map collections. We both work at institutions that have a long, long historical legacy of collecting and acquiring and maintaining geographical collections for the use of very diverse publics. And what that has meant both for our institutions and most like it is that we have oftentimes had a sort of collections first mentality, right? What we do most of all is we maintain our collections and we make them accessible and we make them interesting. But we also have this other function of institutions that draw people into both the scholarly and the public work of engaging with maps and engaging with the sorts of questions that emerge from map collections. The digital revolution broadly, of course, has put libraries, museums, other cultural institutions in this really interesting place where we now have something like a common pool of resources to draw on. Now, of course, that's not really true in practice, right? It's not as though one digital object is truly equivalent to one digital object across institutions, but we are at a point where we are thinking about collections really in a cross-institutional fashion, right? Not only in terms of what we collect and what we interpret, but also in terms of the technical resources and the interpretive resources that are needed in that shared space. you all have heard a lot of really exciting technical development that comes out of the Allmaps project, which I think is really nicely aligned with the broader goals of the IIIF community in terms of building technical resources that work across collections. And I think what we want to sort of bring to the table in this last session is, what does that allow us to do when suddenly we have this ability to work across collections in really interesting ways, where I, as a curator at the Leventhal Center, can just as easily work with materials that are in Marcy's collections or in the Library of Congress's collections or in a collection, in a different hemisphere, as much as I could work with my own collections. What does that mean for the way that we're building tools and working with new audiences and supporting work that ranges from very traditional scholarly work all the way through public engagement? So I'll turn it over to Marcy. I think we can have a little bit of a back and forth, but this is really meant to be a conversation which engages all of you in the audience. What do we need collectively, zooming out from our own individual needs? What do we need at Leventhal? What does Marcy need at AGSL? What does this institution need at their institution? So all of us who are broadly interested in a kind of collective project of digital map librarianship, what do we need together?
What I'll say about all of this is and play off what Garrett was saying, is that in this collaborative collection building, in a sense, is it allows the smaller institutions who might struggle financially to implement other tools that cost money to be able to have access to solutions for creating more accessible digital collections. We in the AGSL fall into that category. We don't have the budget to be able to implement paid tools for georeferencing, or the staff to have time to use other tools like GIS for georeferencing. So something like Allmaps really allows us to create that accessibility within those collections. So I want to just put that out there, is that the way that we're building this and the ideas behind the collaborative nature of the project is to help smaller institutions be able to do these things as well. And I want to also think about, Bert laid out the 4 categories of users that we're thinking about and working to try to please, if you will. So curators, educators, historians or researchers, and then the general public. And the curator aspect of what will be built is really exciting to me as a curator, both for my own work, but also for what it means to be able to use our collections in a variety of different ways within those 4 contexts, for our students, for the researchers, for the general public who is very interested in using maps. I think it really expands on these digital collections that we have spent decades now building, and starting to bring them together in some really unique ways. Stace asked the question about how do we build then a way to search across IIIF collections. We're not certainly there yet. I think the BTAA GeoPortal is one way to do that. And I think as we continue to increase as the technology continues to increase, we're able to try to think about building tools to create even more accessibility across all of these digital collections that we have been building.
Maybe just maybe just to riff a little bit on that last piece of Marcy's question again, thinking institutionally, right? We're really fortunate to have the support of the National Endowment for the Humanities for this current work that we're doing. It's of course supported in other ways, grants that Bert and Jules have received over the years. But how do we put this on a sustainable footing where it is a potential kind of tragedy of the commons sort of thing? We are building something for everybody. We we need it to serve some of our own internal purposes, but there's also this sort of like we're floating this out into the world as something that is meant to be shared. What does that look like in terms of the different types and sizes of institution that rely on it, right? From enormous, well-endowed research universities to, like I'm glad Marcy pointed out, the smaller institutions that probably don't have a GIS librarian or a GIS staff or a dedicated team to maintain their digital collections. We're going to be addressing some of those questions tomorrow as well, but I think beginning to think about them, like not just what does Allmaps do technically, what are its technical capacities, but what are some of its institutional, interpretive capacities as something that brings a group of people together across a lot of different worlds.
Yes.
So we certainly would love to get the perspectives of those of you who come to this as any of those four identities. Presumably, almost everybody in this call falls into that last people who are interested in maps category. But for the curators and historians and scholars as well, who may be less sort of like overawed by the technical wizardry of Allmaps, which of course is itself extremely, it's amazing. It does amazing work for us sort of under the hood. But what do you see in a project like Allmaps that would empower your work, allow you to work across collections, allow you to dig into existing collections in new ways? And how should we consider that in terms of both the future technical roadmap for Allmaps, but also really kind of like whose project is it? We don't consider it like the Leventhal Centers and the AGSLs and BIRD's project. This is meant to be a project that is addressing a much wider and collective set of needs. We have some way, we have many colleagues and collaborators and friends who can help us steer that project, but we really want to hear from all of you in some ways. What do you see in this project as it evolves that would help your work and help you broadly work with digital map collections in a more effective way? Or maybe we have answered all of your questions sufficiently. Maybe I could pose one thing directly to you, Bird. I mean, you're in an interesting position of because you're tooling this out. So many map collections. It's always for me a delight to see like the ones that you're experimenting with. I'll even learn about smaller collections or European collections that I'm not so familiar with. You're obviously leveraging the technical power of IIIF to do that. But how do you think about beyond consuming an institution's IIIF manifest, how do you think about Allmaps being in this like intermediate role in and amongst institutions that has to talk to them, not just in computer language? It's not just we're querying servers, we're also querying human curators and human digital librarians to think about what they need, they plan to build.
I'm just so excited about that. If I wait a few months, there's always a few more institutions that have adopted IIIF. And sometimes things don't work exactly like they should. And then with Allmaps, I have a great way of testing everything. I sometimes write back to the institutions and tell them they need to change a few things in their IIIF data. And sometimes there's institutions that I would really like to work with, but they just don't have IIIF. And then I'll just wait because I know at some point they'll adopt it. And there are already so many maps that we can work with and so many institutions that I am just very glad that we can work with a few that are sort of ahead of the pace, like LMAC and a few others. And then the others will, I'm sure, follow. And so I try my best not to get too much involved in or all the bureaucracies at all the institutions and focus on the development. And I am very confident that IIIF only will grow more and more. Sometimes when things don't work as I like, or when institutions that I would like to work with don't have IIIF, I just wait. I hope that answers some of your questions.
Yeah. Ian, do you want to field questions, or shall Marcy and I field questions?
Yeah, I'm happy to tee them up. I mean, we have questions starting to trickle in again. Tom has asked, Open Geo Metadata has provided a very useful tool for the cross-institutional sharing of metadata and collections. Is the thought behind Allmaps that it will serve an analogous role for curated collections, or would another system be used in sharing curated lists? I feel like, Bert, maybe you would be the best person to take a stab at this to start, but I'm also really curious to hear what Garrett and Marcy might have to say from the sort of librarianship perspective.
Yeah, maybe one of you should answer it.
I mean, in some ways, Bert, your earlier answer to the question about adding other kinds of feature extraction or annotation capabilities to Allmaps, I think was really well put, and that scoping Allmaps in a tight way, where the core functionality of what Allmaps does is allow us to treat images as maps, right? And that's essentially what it's doing. It's images that happen to be images of maps. We're bringing them back into a computer legible register so they can be treated as geographic information. So I don't think the idea is ever for Allmaps to duplicate cataloging and metadata functions. But in terms of sharing map collections, qua maps, as if they were geospatial information, is a really powerful functionality. I might also editorialize. I think there is a bit of a push or pull in shared infrastructure. You can have we want to do the one thing that is going to do all the things, and every institution is going to have to latch onto that. And of course, that can be brittle, and it can be very, very inflexible, and can end up failing because it doesn't serve a bunch of different needs. You can also have we'll let 1,000 flowers bloom and everybody will do their own thing, and there'll be all this kind of bottom-up grassroots kind of work. To me, I think Allmaps kind of falls nicely in the middle of that, where it does offer some really core interoperable functions that are uniform across collections, but then allows everybody from collections managers to people who are doing their own little experimental pop-up projects to try out other things, right? So one could certainly imagine a special pop-up tool for a certain type of curated collections that is built on top of or with Allmaps, but isn't mainlined directly into the core feature set of Allmaps.
Marcy, is there anything you'd like to add before I jump into the next question?
He was just asking if you wanted to chime in. Marcy and I are sitting.
I see.
I'm having this unmute, mute, volume down, volume up circus that's going on, and so I didn't hear what you said.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, you're totally fine. It was our choice. But actually, I want to say just one thing. Back to Bert's point about waiting for collections to implement IIIF. I think as we continue to build tools like Allmaps, it makes it easier for curators or other individuals to advocate for implementing IIIF, or even advocate for digitizing collections. So I can imagine that there's map collections that are sitting around in some institutions that haven't been digitized, and they haven't been digitized because it feels like the work to get there, or there's no use for it. What are we going to do with these things once we digitize? Having tools like Allmaps allows the people who are working in those collections to say, look at these really great tools that we could introduce to our users once we have this resource in place, both the digital collections and the IIIF. So I think like it's important for the IIIF community as well.
And maybe one more piece of that, thinking about maps that might get lost in a larger collection or that haven't been a priority for, whatever collection. I think map collections are interesting in a sense that, only the largest institutions tend to have a dedicated staff to maps as a format. We're both lucky to work in those sorts of institutions. But, even many significant research libraries don't have a map division, or they may not even have one map person focused on maps. And yet the inverse of that is they are some of the most popularly accessible or intriguing visual collections, oftentimes for the general public. You walk into any institution, you tend to see maps on the walls. So, enabling institutions to think about what they could do with their map collections, even if they are not at a spot where they could hire a map curator or a GIS librarian or build up a map division or a map team. Allmaps is an example of the sort of thing where we can provide some of this common infrastructure that an institution without having a ton of specialized knowledge could activate their map collections. And not only could they activate them, but others could activate them as well. Marcy and I and a group of other map curators meet occasionally. And one of the things we think about a lot is, like how do we leverage the fact that we all share this kind of set of digital resources, right? If I want to do a project about Boston, of course, we have an amazing collection on Boston here at the Leventhal Center, but the AGSL has amazing Boston maps, the Rumsey Center, Library of Congress, I can go on and on. So instead of thinking about that as well, I have to start with my collections. I have to start with what's here. Now I'm in a position where I could think about, oh, maybe there's this, one map on this topic in a collection that otherwise is, really not focused on that area, but suddenly I can activate that resource. I can bring it into whatever, piece of digital programming or collaboration with a university. And it doesn't matter that it's not my map or my institution's map. We can work on it in this interoperable way.
I don't think we have any open questions right now, but we did get a couple of really insightful comments from folks that I'd love to highlight before we wrap up in just a few minutes. Christina mentioned that this combination of IIIF and Allmaps has awesome implications for the development of OERs or open educational resources that anyone can use in formal and information educational settings. This is something that is not specifically tied to OERs, but is in fact part of our NEH work. We're beginning a sort of dual documentation project for documenting how librarians and library workers can do things like build Eric's GeoBlacklight plugin into their collections portals. On a parallel track, we are creating some more public-facing documentation on how historians, educators, and researchers can get started using Allmaps, which right now the documentation is solid for developers, but thin for people who wouldn't consider themselves technical. Which brings me to the second point that came up in some of the comments, both from Stace and Christina, that it's important to highlight the quote unquote non-technical people or people who self-proclaim as non-technical as being able to engage with these resources. I think tools like Allmaps, and as Stace and Christina have highlighted here, enabling participation with these materials through those tools reduces friction for people who don't think of themselves as maybe geospatial scientists or scholars. And hopefully this is a nice sign for the ways that different sort of sections of the geospatial and geographic and library metadata communities are poised to work together over the next few years and beyond. Just on this call, we have such an exciting group of people together. So it's great to see progress being made here. We have one more question that just came in. And we'll see, I think we can squeeze in a quick answer. Adam asks, for Allmaps Curator, do you expect it to be independently deployed by multiple institutions and federated in some way, or a single deployment, like, for example, curator.allmaps.org, within which all orgs and users would have an account? It's a great question, Adam. This is one of the sort of fundamental differences, I think, between something like Allmaps and something like GeoBlacklight, which, you know, every library might stand up their own GeoBlacklight instance. Allmaps, I think, is the reverse. My sense is that Curator would, by default, exist as a federated or centralized application. But Allmaps is all open source. So anybody who wanted to create their own Allmaps, you know, ecosystem, like, they could do that. They could stand up a server. They could capture georeference annotations in parallel for your particular use case. But by default, curator.allmaps.org would sort of capture the public-facing use of Allmaps. And we think that, I mean, I don't want to speak for the whole team, but so far in our conversations, that seems like it would be the easiest way to let library institutions build upon and engage with the tool. I'll stop there and see if anyone has final comments they'd like to add.
Yeah, so we are going to build Allmaps Curator in such a way that it will also function completely offline. Of course, you need access to TripApp servers. By default, it will use the TripApp API, the Allmaps API, to store the collections that people make. It will also need the Allmaps API for user authentication, but you can also use it without any of that. You can just access TripApp servers, reorganize the things, and then save your work as a JSON file and work from that JSON file later and save it on your own computer. And the same will be true for Allmaps Editor in the new version we're working on. You can also use offline in a way that you don't need to save anything to the Allmaps API. So institutions can always choose to be independent of the Allmaps backend and work with local files, so that even when Allmaps might stop, or its servers might stop working in some far away future, the apps will still work.
Bert, I think that's probably a good place for us to end it, because it ends us on a note of the uncertain future and questions around sustainability of these tools, which we'll be picking up with tomorrow in a much smaller group, but sharing parts of that discussion publicly. I want to thank Bert, Eric, Garrett, Marcy, for your comments and presentations here in this final session. We're a little bit past time, so I won't keep you all here. Just a broad thank you to everyone for participating and joining. It's really great to see the interest. It's really exciting for us to know that there's a large community of users who are excited, as excited as we are about these tools. If we did not answer your question, please feel free to email us. We're always available to chat about these things. If someone wouldn't mind dropping a link to the form once again, if we haven't, I think Anne actually has dropped a link to that form. And I'll drop a link to everyone to our Allmaps news site, which is where we'll post updates about the project, including the recordings from this video. I think, yeah, as we wrap up here, we're just getting a couple final comments in. Stace mentions check the IIIF calendar for IIIF Maps meetings. It's an excellent way to stay involved. We'd love to get more involved in this as we move through. Sebastian asked about examples implementing IIIF from Zoomify. I am not sure, Sebastian, that I can answer this right now. I think it might make the most sense if you could shoot us an email, we can answer it for you that way, unless anyone else here can answer that question quickly. Yeah, Sebastian, shoot us a message and we'll try to we can talk more about that offline. One last thank you, everyone. If you'll be around tomorrow, we will see you then. If not, please stay in touch, and thanks for your support on this project. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.